The Rangers spent nearly all of their free agent money on Vladislav Gavrikov, but we are telling you why he might be just what this team needs.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1377 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, Jon Chik. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So today, going to go ahead and continue on with our fun-filled offseason series, best and worst case scenarios for every single player on the New York Rangers. Basically, what we do is we take a look at the projected opening night roster for the upcoming season. We then spend time discussing every single player that we expect to be on that roster and talk about all the good things that could happen, all the bad things that could happen, and pretty much everything in between. And today, we're going to shift our attention to one of the newest members of the New York Rangers, and that would, of course, be defenseman Vladislav Gavrikov, the prize free agent get of the Blue Shirts this off-season. And we're going to go ahead and do what we always do. We will talk first about the worst case scenarios, everything that could potentially go wrong, or just things that might not click for Gavrikov, in his first season with the Rangers. And then we'll go to the good stuff, the best case scenarios, the fun things. Always good to end on the positives. And then, of course, we'll have a verdict, some final thoughts on Gavrikov and the outlook for his first season on Broadway. But we begin, like I said, with the worst case scenarios. I think in a worst case scenario, there's a long adjustment period for Gavrikov coming over to the Rangers all the way from Los Angeles. And this is a reason or a worst case scenario that is not at all exclusive to Vladislav Gavrikov or even the Rangers. I mean, you could probably throw this out there for just about any player in the NHL that joins a new team, whether it's by free agency, a trade, whatever it might be. There's always that potential that, something might not click right away, or there could be a situation where, the player wants to get off to a good start, but he presses a little bit and it doesn't really go his way. Obviously, this can happen with just about anybody. The one positive I can say here, though, as I'm saying all this, as it applies to Vladislav Gavrikov, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in today's episode, but he's just such a steady, consistent player and just plays, a very solid, well-rounded game that I don't think this is really all that likely to happen to Gavrikov. But be that as it may, again, player on a new team, you never know how things can get, especially in the early goings. You're learning a new system. You've got a whole new coaching staff. You got to figure out what they want from you. You're trying to build chemistry with your defense partner, in Gavrikov's case, which will probably be Adam Fox. Getting to know your teammates, even just little things that we don't really think about, like how do I get to the stadium, right? And where's the coffee maker? All kinds of little things like that. So it's always a little bit of a jolt, I think, for a player whenever they have to, go from one team to another. But be that as it may, Gavrikov seems built to handle it. And I think his style of play really bodes well from changing from one team to another. I think also in a worst case scenario, and this sort of is piggybacking on what I just said, but I think we all pretty much know, or at least expect, that Gavrikov is very likely going to start this upcoming season alongside Adam Fox. And that will, of course, be the Rangers' top pairing. So in a worst case scenario, he will struggle to find that consistency with Adam Fox. On paper, I feel like these two should work pretty well together. Gavrikov is somebody that can chip in offensively from time to time, but he's more known as somebody that's a defensive defenseman and somebody that always has good positioning. Not necessarily an ultra physical player, but he'll certainly use his frame to his advantage. Somebody that's going to clear guys out of the crease, somebody that's going to defend the blue line well. And then Adam Fox, you've got this perennial Norris candidate, this elite two-way defenseman. And I know that by Fox's standards this past year, a little bit of a down season. But, you look at what Adam Fox did this past year, and 95% of the defensemen in the league would kill for a season like that, right? So I think it's a good pairing. I think it'll work. Fox had really good chemistry with Ryan Lindgren, but Lindgren started to fall off this past season. And of course, the Rangers just fell off entirely, and they traded Lindgren during the trade deadline, given that he was an impending free agent. And obviously, Fox and Lindgren had good chemistry for a lot of years, but I'm hoping that it will be something similar with Gavrikov and Fox. Hopefully, it clicks right away. And if not, certainly sooner rather than later. I think also in a worst case scenario, and I'm including myself in this one. I'm going to talk about Ranger fans. I'm including myself in this. But all of us collectively, Ranger fans, we expect Gavrikov to be something that he's really not. Now, Gavrikov to me is somebody that does, as I mentioned, have a very well-rounded game, very solid defenseman. But one thing that he's not is overly physical, despite being 6'3" and 220 pounds. I wouldn't say that he's not physical at all or that he like shies away from contact or anything like that, because that's not the case either. He will throw the body on occasion. And certainly, even if it's not like racking up hits in the stat department, he will use his frame to his advantage. He'll figure out a way to, being as big as he is, use his frame to win puck battles, clear guys away from the front of the net, whatever it might be. So that's all well and good. And he does hit from time to time. I was looking up some video on Gavrikov, and there's one from the playoffs last year where he basically open ice hit on Connor McDavid and knocked him down to the ice. I mean, scoring up McDavid is a very difficult thing to do, and knocking him down to the ice probably just as difficult, but he pulled it off. I also found another video of him hitting Sammy Blais, New York Ranger legend Sammy Blais, in the neutral zone. He knocked him down as well. But, something that we sort of suspected about Gavrikov, or at least I did. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I didn't really think that he was like this ultra physical defenseman. And we got to do a crossover episode this offseason with Eddie Garcia from Locked On Kings. Shout out to Eddie. But Eddie basically confirmed as much. This is not the guy that's going to be, creaming people with these gigantic open ice hits. It's not going to be Trouba Train 2.0. You're not going to see a whole lot of that. Now, it could happen once in a while. I mean, you look back in the playoffs a couple of years ago. We saw Panarin, of all people, absolutely just destroy TJ Oshie with an open ice hit. So you might see it from time to time, and certainly Gavrikov is big enough that he can pull it off, but that's not really his game. He's more about just sound positioning and just doing all the little things correctly. And again, just a very well-rounded defenseman. And you know what? That's okay. If Gavrikov isn't out there taking people's heads off on a game-by-game, night-by-night basis, I can live with that as long as he excels in the areas where he's excelled in the past. And I think he will. Again, a very steady, very consistent defenseman. That's something that Gavrikov certainly has going for him. But those are the worst case scenarios. In just a second, we're going to shift our attention to the best case scenarios and talk about why Gavrikov might be exactly what the doctor ordered for this New York Ranger team. We'll get to that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people cannot name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does all the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off of your first year. That's 50% off of your first year at monarchmoney.com with code Locked On NHL. All right, we just want to go ahead and thank everybody, as always, for tuning into the Locked On New York Ranger podcast. Big shout out to the everydayers. As always, thank you guys so much for, continuing to support the show throughout the entire season, the entire offseason, the whole 9 yards. You're definitely going to want to stick around. We're going to have a couple more of these best and worst case scenario episodes. Definitely going to do one on Will Cooley. After that, we might start combining multiple players into one episode. We'll see how we want to do it. If there's a certain player that you want me to talk about for like a full episode that we haven't covered already, certainly let me know about that in the comment section or whatever. And also, we've got the upcoming Rangers Flyers rookie series. Definitely looking forward to that. It's always one of the more fun, intriguing events on the Rangers calendar throughout the entire year. It's the first taste of Ranger hockey for the forthcoming season. So really can't wait to hopefully watch those games. I don't know if they've announced a stream yet, but they've been streaming it in recent years, or at least the Flyers have. Maybe the Rangers one day will get their stuff together, but not as of yet. Anyway, let's go ahead and keep the focus for the time being on Vladislav Gavrikov, and let's talk about the best case scenarios, the good things that could happen with Gavrikov this upcoming season. I think in a best case scenario, all of us as Ranger fans come to understand very, very quickly that Gavrikov is the best defense partner that Adam Fox has ever had. I think when you look at the Rangers going out and targeting Gavrikov as plainly and as intently as they did this offseason, there's multiple reasons for it. I mean, we've discussed a few of them already, but I think one of the biggest ones is that Adam Fox needs a tag team partner, man. Ryan Lindgren is gone now, as we mentioned, and his game was starting to decline even before that happened. And then last year, it's kind of like a mishmash of players after, Lindgren is traded. And I think, if Keandre Miller was still here, maybe he would be an option. I completely understand and am in agreement with the Rangers trading Miller, especially for the haul that they got. But it does take another player, out of the equation as far as a possible dance partner for Adam Fox. And so there was really a void there. I mean, who was going to play top pairing left defense this season if you didn't make this move? And on top of everything else, Adam Fox, again, I think him and Ryan Lindgren obviously had very good chemistry. And I do think Ryan Lindgren will be one of the more underappreciated Rangers of this era based on just kind of how it went downhill very quickly this past season. But be that as it may, Gavrikov, everything we're hearing about him, everything we know about him, everything that we've seen. I mean, we're all Ranger fans here. Most of us are anyway. I don't know how many Kings games we've seen over the last handful of seasons. But again, this guy is a very consistent, very steady player. Adam Fox can definitely make that work. And I think it's a pairing that should, could, and will get off to a really good start. And we're going to notice pretty quickly in a best case scenario, and probably just in reality in general, that Adam Fox, man, this is the best partner that he's ever had thus far in his AHL career. I think also in a best case scenario, Vladislav Gavrikov excels at quote unquote boring hockey. Now, on the surface, I use the word boring and you kind of roll your eyes and, but here's the thing. Gavrikov is going to be a breath of fresh air, I think, this season for a lot of us Ranger fans who remember what happened this past season and remember just how badly so many of the Ranger defensemen struggled in so many different aspects of the game. I mean, the amount of mistakes they made, the amount of times they were caught out of position, their complete unwillingness to defend the front of the net, allowing teams to do damage off of the rush. Now, I mean, every team's going to give up a goal once in a while off of the rush, but I mean, you had to hold your breath. Every time the opposing team crossed the Ranger blue line with any kind of speed, any kind of gusto last season, you were holding your breath. And this is probably going to be a goal, or at the very least, it's going to be a grade A scoring chance that Igor's going to have to stand on his head to try to stop. But I think with Gavrikov, he's so steady, so consistent. There's not a ton of flash to his game, but I think that's just what the doctor ordered. That's exactly what the Rangers need. He just does his job very consistently. He will defend the blue line very well. He will clear guys out from the front of the net. He will win some puck battles. He's decent with the puck on his stick as well. And again, it's not the biggest, flashiest name that was available in free agency this offseason, but he's probably the guy that the Rangers needed to target. And they did, and they got their guy. And they got him what I think was a pretty reasonable price. So, yep, I think in a best case scenario, he just kind of goes about his business and you just don't worry about him too much. He's one of those guys, you just pencil him into the lineup and, okay, he's going to go out there and he's going to give you solid hockey night in and night out. Compared to what we saw this past season, that sounds amazing. Whether it's Gavrikov or any other player that we're talking about, just steady, consistent hockey. I think also in a best case scenario, and I did touch on this briefly just a second ago, but I think that he will very clearly become the best Ranger defenseman when it comes to defending the blue line. Now, again, that is sort of a low bar based on what we saw from the Ranger defenseman this past season and how easy it was to get to the front of the net and whatnot, and how dangerous teams always looked on the rush against the Rangers. But when you watch some of Gavrikov's highlights, it's pretty obvious that this is a strength of his. And if you're tired of watching the Rangers, give up all these goals off of the rush and defend very passively, then you might become a Vladislav Gavrikov fan very quickly this upcoming season, because the Rangers, they got to get that under control. It can't go on like this. You can't just bleed scoring opportunities left and right, especially off of the rush. There were just too many times last season where grade A scoring chances were coming far, far too easily for the Rangers opposition. And with that in mind, Gavrikov should step up and he should be able to, nullify that at least a little bit. He's, a mobile defenseman, especially for his size. He's always got good positioning. He'll play a physical enough game where, he can obviously, affect the rush and make guys start going, east and west as opposed to north, south when it comes to the rush. I think Gavrikov, again, he's going to do a really nice job for the Rangers, and not the least of which is going to be his ability to defend the blue line. I think also in a best case scenario, we could see a situation where Gavrikov gives us a little bit more offense than we're expecting. Now, certainly he's not going to be an offensive juggernaut. I think we all understand that. It's obviously not his calling card. He's not going to put up Adam Fox-like numbers out there. We understand this. But For his career, and we'll go through his total points here real quickly, 29 goals, 106 assists, a total of 135 points in 435 games. So nothing special, nothing to write home about, even, when it comes to defensive defensemen. But it is worth pointing out that his point totals have been climbing for 3 straight seasons. He had 19 points in 2022, 2023 with the Jackets and the Kings. Then 2 years ago, up to 23 points. Then this past year, up to 30 points for Vladislav Gavrikov. And keep in mind, this is somebody who basically never plays on the power play. I mean, I don't know that he's never been out there during the man advantage. I mean, I'm sure he did it at one time or another, but he doesn't do it with any regularity whatsoever. He does not have a power play point in his career. So for Gavrikov to go out there with the Kings, who are a middle-of-the-road team as far as offense and goal scoring is concerned, and not have any power play time, and end up with 30 points on a team that, again, tends to emphasize defense above all else, I mean, that's not bad. And you factor in that he's going to be out there with some really good players. You got to figure, again, he's going to be out there with Adam Fox. That alone is going to result probably, or at least potentially, in an uptick in his assists. But then you also figure that, okay, well, he's going to be with Adam Fox. Adam Fox is going to be out there quite a bit with the Rangers, their top players, their skilled players, when they're looking for offense, when they're looking for goals. And Gavrikov might be there right along with him. So with that being the case, I do think we'll see a little bit of an uptick in his points. And as far as like moving the puck and passing, my understanding is that he's certainly serviceable in that area. Certainly not a liability or anything like that. So I do think we might end up getting a little bit more offense from Gavrikov than a lot of us are thinking at the moment. So fingers crossed that that's the case. Fingers crossed that everything goes well for Vladislav Gavrikov. And in just a second, we're going to keep everything rolling here. We're going to conclude today's episode with some final thoughts on Gavrikov, sort of a verdict, a season outlook, and just what to expect going into year one of the Vladislav Gavrikov New York Rangers era. We will do all that good stuff in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you are ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you will get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel is awesome because however you like to bet, player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds, it's all right there at your fingertips. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It is quick, it is easy, and it is the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up today's episode with some final thoughts on Gavrikov. A couple, I guess you can call it a verdict, whatever you want to call it here. But yeah, as far as the season outlook is concerned, I expect Gavrikov to be one of the true workhorses of this team, just kind of that lunch pail mindset, the blue-collar kind of approach to hockey. And again, I hate going back to last season all the time, but it's kind of inevitable when you're previewing the upcoming season. And there just weren't enough of those kinds of players on the New York Rangers. I do think Gavrikov is one of those guys. And I mentioned the term workhorse just a second ago. When you look at time on the ice for Gavrikov, for his career, he's at 21 minutes and 12 seconds of ice time per night. Doesn't really jump off the page. I mean, it's a little more than average for a defenseman is basically what you're looking at. But this past season with the Kings, he averaged a career high 23 minutes and 5 seconds of ice time per night. So he was obviously a go-to defenseman for the Kings during the majority of the season. And for a frame of reference, again, Gavrikov, 23:05 time on the ice per night last season. Adam Fox was 23:15. So almost a tie. I mean, it's basically a tie. And we know how much Adam Fox plays. And when we watch these games, we know how much it feels like he's always out there. And obviously, Fox is a big part. 5v5, the power play, the penalty kill. Gavrikov's not going to play on the power play. At least I don't think he is. But that, in a way, makes it even more impressive how much ice time he logs. Because if the Kings aren't on the man advantage, Gavrikov was on the ice last year. Slight exaggeration to make the point, but you get where I'm coming from. And if you look at last season, I mentioned Fox a minute ago. He was the only Ranger from last year's team that averaged more time on the ice per night than Gavrikov did with the Kings. And, we mentioned Keandre Miller earlier. And we could say what we want about K'Andre Miller, and a lot of us have. And again, I am completely in favor of that trade that the Rangers executed with the Canes this offseason with K'Andre Miller. And, I stand by that. But one thing that nobody can take away from K'Andre Miller, the dude was an absolute workhorse. I mean, he never missed any games. I think the only games he missed in the last 3 seasons, I would have to double check this to know for sure, but I think the only 3 games he missed were the 3 games that he was suspended. Or he did have the mental health break where he missed a couple of games too, but he's never missed a game due to an injury. And obviously, he was somebody that was always on the ice as well. He was second on the team in time on the ice, only to Adam Fox last season. But that also means there's a little bit of a void to be filled. We need another workhorse defenseman, and I think certainly Vlad Gavrikov can be that guy. We know Fox is going to be on the ice constantly, and Gavrikov is his defense partner. So there you go. You get the feeling that Gavrikov's going to be out there with Fox more often than not. Another thought that I had about Gavrikov, I'm curious to see how the Rangers line up on the PK this upcoming season because, for a lot of reasons. To begin with, if you want to look at the whole big picture, you've got Kreider, who's obviously no longer here, and he was a big part of the PK for the last handful of seasons. And, you've got other players that are in the mix now as well. But you've also got a situation where the Rangers have completely revamped their blue line, and guys that as soon as the start of last season would have been in the mix for PK time, they're almost all gone now. The Rangers' top 4 for several seasons there in no particular order were Fox, Lindgren, Miller, and Trouba. The last 3 of those guys are gone. And those were also the 4 defensemen, for the most part, that the Rangers used when it came to the penalty kill. And with that being the case, they've obviously got a void there. Guys are going to have to step up. I'm sure Braden Schneider is going to be on the PK in a more bigger role than maybe he's had on the PK in recent seasons. I think Borgen's certainly going to be in the mix, but I think Gavrikov for sure. He's going to be one of the go-to guys when it comes to the Ranger PK. But I'm also curious to see how they line up in terms of who's with who among the defensemen, because if you guys remember, in recent seasons, we've seen mostly Fox with Lindgren at 5v5 and mostly Miller with Trouba at 5v5. They shuffle the deck every now and then, but for the most part, those were the pairings the last couple of seasons. But then when the Rangers were shorthanded, you would often see Fox with Miller, and then you would see Lindgren with Trouba. And I'm just wondering, when the Rangers are shorthanded, will they split up Fox and Gavrikov? And as strange as it sounds, I think I kind of want them to do that. Because, yes, 5v5, we want Gavrikov with Fox for all the reasons that we just talked about. And, Gavrikov is somebody that they see as a top pair defenseman very clearly. But I also don't think it's such a bad thing for Gavrikov and everybody, really, to get used to playing with other defensemen as well. And, you could just experiment with it a little bit. You could have Gavrikov out there with Will Borgen. Maybe Fox is out there with Braden Schneider. That would entail Schneider switching to the left side most likely, but that's something that he can handle. So I'm just very curious to see how they handle it. And I think that you could see something similar where maybe on the PK, they spread the wealth a little bit. Gavrikov and Fox are on different PK pairings. Something else that I want to mention here, I feel like this Ranger team could really use a little bit more personality. And again, I learned this mostly from talking with Eddie Garcia of Locked On Kings. He does an awesome job with his show, and we did a crossover episode once the Rangers signed Gavrikov to get a little bit more intel on the player. But he mentioned that, Gavrikov, he does kind of keep things light a little bit. He's a good teammate, and he will joke around at times. Now, I understand you don't want to turn the locker room into a complete circus where everybody's just goofing around and nobody's taking anything seriously. Although, as I say that, I might actually prefer that over what we saw last season. Last season was just doom and gloom. Everybody looked like their dog had just been kidnapped. Nobody looked like they wanted to be there. I would take a complete circus atmosphere in the Ranger locker room over whatever in the world that was last season, because at least then it would be a little bit more fun. There'd be a little bit more personality in there, and maybe these guys could kind of, I don't know, put the pieces together when they're on the ice. They're goofy off the ice. They lock in when they're on the ice, whatever it might be. But quick detour over. As far as Gavrikov, again, this team was just lacking in any sense of personality, any sense of fun last year. I don't think anybody smiled the entire season, or not very often anyway. And Gavrikov is somebody that it sounds like does kind of keep things light a little bit. So it sounds like he can be a good teammate. And again, maybe just inject the locker room with a little bit of personality. Somebody that did that in the past for the Rangers was Ryan Reeves. And people have mixed feelings on Reeves. I thought he did fine the first season that he was with the Rangers. And they ended up moving on from him the season after that in the middle of the season. And I understand why they did that too. But it felt like that room kind of loosened up a little bit. He had that whole, Shesty release us thing that he would do before games. And the Rangers need a thing. They just need a thing of some kind, a fun celebration, whatever it might be. An entrance onto the rink when they're going out there for the start of the game, like what we had with Ryan Reeves. The Rangers need a thing. Maybe Vlad Gavrikov can provide that. Or if nothing else, just kind of loosen everybody up a little bit, get these guys back to having fun. Playing professional hockey is not supposed to be as miserable as the Rangers made it look last season. I realize they're human. I realize they go through trials and tribulations like all of us do. But my God, you're playing professional hockey for a living. How about a little bit of life? And maybe Gavrikov, like I said, can inject that into the Rangers, at least a little bit this upcoming season. And as far as final thoughts here, the bottom line, look, the Rangers this offseason, they did not have a lot of salary cap space with which to work, even after they traded K'Andre Miller and even after they traded Chris Kreider. A lot of the Rangers' salary cap space went to in-season extensions. Igor got one. Will Borgen got one. Even guys like Quick got one. Eero Vakanainen got one. Off the top of my head, I might even be forgetting somebody. But a lot of that money, was kind of spent during the middle of last season. So you really only had an opportunity to get one expensive player, and Gavrikov ended up being that guy. The Rangers have to get this right. If this doesn't work, it's going to be a serious problem for this team because, again, you had precious little money to work with. You're coming off of a season where the team didn't even make the playoffs. You have to get better. You're putting a lot of eggs into the Vladislav Gavrikov basket. And I know some people are wary about the fact that he does have 7 years on this contract at $7 million per season. You cross that bridge when you get there. I mean, he'll be 36 when the contract ends, so not ancient. And if he plays really good hockey for the first 5 years of his contract, then I think we can live with average hockey for the final 2 if he's still here at that time. We'll see. But I do think this is a good signing. The only truly significant free agent signing that the Rangers were able to make this offseason was, of course, Gavrikov. And that just heightens the need for them to obviously get it right. I mean, who is the next biggest free agent signing for this team? It was probably Taylor Radish. And what did he get? 2 years and 1.5 million per season, somewhere in that ballpark. And nothing against Radish, but other than Gavrikov, it basically was just patchwork, throughout the rest of the roster to fill out spaces. So they had to get it right. Hopefully they did. I was lukewarm to the Rangers targeting Gavrikov this offseason when the rumors were first breaking, but it kind of won me over a little bit once I found out, what a steady, consistent defenseman he is. And that's something that the Rangers badly, badly need. And hopefully they got their man in Vladislav Gavrikov. So we can call it there. The only other thing I want to mention here today, actually 2 things. Final chance for anybody that wants to play in the Locked On New York Rangers Fantasy League that played last season. It's your last chance to reclaim your spot. If I don't hear back from you in the next 24 hours, we're going to open it up to some other players, some new players, and we'll welcome them into the league this year for sure. So there's that. And then also still collecting stories on Sam Rosen and Stefan Matteau. If you ever met Sam Rosen, feel free to send a story my way. I've already gotten a couple. And I mean, everybody that sent me a story just says he's every bit as nice as he comes across on TV. And also Stefan Matteau, if you were alive back then in 1994, you can send me a story of what you were doing, who you were with, how you reacted when Stefan Matteau scored his famous double overtime Game 7 goal against the New Jersey Devils. We've already collected a couple of stories there as well, and I think that can make for a fun offseason episode right before the Rangers start playing hockey again. But we'll call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @JChick17. Once again, @JCHIK17. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.